Really know. I actually have a magazine from the conference called The Standard.
Yeah, we got that all the time, yeah.
Okay, and there is a history of how the Swedish Baptist Church started, and the individual who you maybe know of, Nilsson, is that correct? I don't remember, but he was a Swedish. I actually sent a copy of this to Nils. He was a captain of a ship, and he became a Christian, and he wanted to be Baptist. He actually ended up going to jail in Sweden because of his faith. He went to Germany because he wanted to be baptized, and he found that they were baptizing people in Germany. So he went to Germany to be baptized.
Wow.
And he is the one who was kind of an itinerant pastor, traveling around, converting a lot of the Swedish people to Baptist ways, and probably influenced our families.
Is this from the Standard?
This is from the Standard.
Does Edgren ring a bell?
Well, yes.
Boys dormitory.
Boys' dormitory at Bethel.
Yeah. that was named after one of the founders of the church in Sweden.
Right, yes. So anyway, all of this, they came over to the United States, and now it was interesting that your father, I read, or your grandfather, went to Bethel Seminary in Sweden. So at some point there was a Swedish Bethel. Okay.
Didn't know that.
I believe that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as a result, these Swedes settled in Jamestown when they immigrated over here. Initially, I believe the First Baptist Church of Jamestown paid for the property down on Chandler Street so that the Swedish Baptists could build a church. They would have had, it was a small wooden church initially that they built. Then they were meeting in the First Baptist Church as well, and that was torn down when they built the church that now stands.
Chandler Street.
Chandler Street.
Yeah.
Yep.
So curious though, Shirley, that it's right across from the Lutheran church. How interesting. Do you find that ironic?
Yes.
I do.
The other thing that was ironic, I mean, when we went over to Sweden and Nils was telling us how they actually came because of persecution, it's like, from the Lutherans? You know, here, it's like, we're all Christian, so the Lutherans. But I think it was an economic thing. The Lutheran Church had become the Church of Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
And people paid taxes.
Right, yeah.
And it was
a
way-
government.
Oh, it was a government thing.
That was, that's how they were getting revenue. In fact, you were saying also, you were asking a question in regards to why they were baptized as infants. In this Lutheran church, your name does not become your name until you're actually baptized. Then you officially
Get your name.
get your name. So it was an important legal act to have it that way.
That's so funny. One of our grandsons just married a little Lutheran gal. And the dad said he had to become Lutheran in order to marry his daughter. But it's Missouri then.
I was going to say, which one?
So we said that's okay.
Words your trip to Chandler's Valley and the beginning of First Lutheran? Just because it's all Swedish, right?
Right, but no, because they were Lutheran. The oldest Lutheran church in the area is down in Chandler's Valley. And my mother was actually a Lutheran. So we went down there because there were some records down there.
When the King of Sweden came, he went down to Chandler.
Yes.
And where is that?
Just outside of Sugar
Sugar
Grove.
Grove.
Yeah.
to Sugar, on your way to North Warren.
Yeah.
Go right, you see it, it's right there.
So
I didn't know.
I didn't
initially,
either.
they started in a home
Mm-hmm.
that is still on Baker Street, and it needs to
what's
be
the
torn
number?
down.
Is that a book about the history of the church?
Yes, yes. This is from the Diamond Anniversary from 1884 to 1959.
Is it possible to get a copy of all that?
Sure.
I'd love that.
Sure. The task of founding Chandler Street Baptist Church was not an easy one. The people who made up the charter membership had arrived from Sweden to a strange land with strange customs. They had the same national background as well as a personal experience with the Savior and strong Baptist convictions. These common bonds drew them together and created a desire to unite their individual efforts into a collective one. To the best of our knowledge, the first Swedish Baptist family to arrive in Jamestown was Mr. and Mrs. Carl Hammarström, who arrived here in 1869 from Gävle, Skåne, Sweden. During the same year, Mr. and Mrs. John Lundahl settled, did not understand the English language. Other Swedish families came. He corresponded with Reverend O. Lind, pastor of the Swedish Baptist Church in New York City, and informed him of the possibilities of starting a Baptist work. Gathered together in Worcester, Massachusetts in June of 1884 to organize, and Pastor Lind arrived in Jamestown on July 17th and provided the little church with leadership. So from then they met in a little, almost like a little wooden cabin that was on Institute Street, which is down where Jamestown High School is now.
Ah,
I was
okay.
gonna say, down Brooklyn Square area.
Yeah. Then eventually, they did buy the area on Chandler Street, and I guess there was a building there that was by the Methodists. They bought it. March 7th, 1982, it was decided to sell the old church on Institute Street for $2,000, and they borrowed $3,000 to purchase the old Methodist church. And from that time on, they eventually tore that down and built the brick building that we have there now, which you have gone through before your mother died, right? You took a visit down there?
We did. And literally, I'm walking it right now, talking with the current pastor, Cintron, C-I-N-T-R-O-N, with the hope that they will let us get in tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I will let you know.
Now, will you let me know?
Yes,
My
I do.
grandkids can't come. One of them got COVID, so
Okay, so you're...
so I'm more available.
Yeah, so that anyways, we're getting permission. It's it's an apostolic, it's a apostolic church currently. Services are in Spanish, but when we were there, gosh, 10 years ago, more, you walk in and it's deja vu.
It is. It's
it's
really,
Wow.
Hasn't changed.
you should come.
I would like to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
The high, help me out, what's the pulpit that's raised platform is still there?
So-
Where the choir was in the
I
back.
heard when one group moved into the church, they had an exorcism.
Yes, they did.
Oh, did they
That's
have,
true.
really? They had an exorcism?
Yeah.
Because of the bad spirits.
Probably should.
I think they took the pipe, didn't the pipe organ end up at Bethel in Minnesota?
I don't know.
I don't know.
So, there's pictures here of the Young People's Society.
Yeah, I do remember my
And,
mother saying that.
Dan's grandfather standing there. String band
Yep.
was a big thing.
My dad was
These
first
were
string.
very musical people.
Yes.
And I think our family was very musical.
Oh, our church always had the best music.
And
Every one of
I
Edith
think-
and C.S.'s kids played some kind of musical instrument. Even my dad.
And I vaguely remember hearing this string band, like play on a Sunday night as a little kid. Remember that at all?
Well, what I do remember that, it was in the basement at the time I was there, and Evie Marker was one of the guys who was intimately involved in bringing out the strings and playing a couple of instruments. And there were a few others. I don't think it was the band, I mean, that size. But I do remember
that, Shirley?
I do.
You do?
Well, yes. And my grandmother here is playing a mandolin. There's a picture of her. And this has got to be Corden Marker, right?
Gordon, yeah. Well,
He had a distinct appearance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Wilbur Marker, now he makes violins, I think.
Yeah, he made,
He was
Guitars.
and
Guitars.
Guitars.
Gibson guitars, yeah.
Excellent guitars.
But now my
Gibson,
dad, his violin, he gave it to my oldest grandson, but he thought he was good, but he hasn't done anything with it. Oh, well.
You might, you never know.
So
Get rid of it. That
this was
one
a
is
very
good instrument.
cohesive group with other Swedish churches in the area. They would often get together for different conferences. You can take it from here, Dan. His grandfather, Leander, who was he was the financial secretary of the church.
Ooh, neat.
And he was a builder here in the area. And he loved to go to the conferences. And I think it was Randy's funeral. We had brought these big pictures from the conferences.
Yeah, I remember that.
We should have brought them today, I guess. I didn't know we were going to be doing
About 4
this.
or 5 at least.
Yeah, we can bring them tomorrow. So you can see
They
them.
were you just roll out this film, and then it will come up.
And you have to roll it out
I
again, yeah.
had them matted, so, and it's amazing the clarity. It's like brown and white with the shades, and you can pick out. I mean, and I remember at your dining room, and your mother sitting there with a magnifying glass, and
yeah.
she knew just about everybody, and she
Yeah.
just drank that in. And that's a part of me that I wanted to know Leander.
His
who,
grandfather.
At that point, at that stage of life, I mean, there's a lot of people that didn't have cars, and he would drive, not only to Warren and Keysport, but also out to Chicago and the conference at Bethel in Minnesota. And the part one in Chicago, my mom's there in his arms, back by the tree. Is that Chicago?
Yeah, it's Chicago. It was.
And all the dates and everything are on there, Diamond Jubilee and all this stuff. I mean, it's like,
It's a
who
huge.
is this guy?
I mean, everybody that was at that conference. So it's a huge picture, and they're standing next to a statue of Lincoln. And so it's in one of the parks, Lincoln Park, whatever.
Yeah, between the
Yeah. And
city
so
and
the
the
people
lake.
are really,
Yeah,
really
too
tiny,
tiny.
but we're looking with a mag. And so we find his grandfather holding his mother, who was age
Oh,
5.
wow.
So it would have been in 26, like 1926, 1927.
Isn't
So
it fun to find those things?
it is. It's wonderful.
It just, yeah.
And a funny joke. I had a conference out there for work in Chicago. So we were walking along Millennium Park there.
You found Lincoln.
We found Lincoln. And I said,
Stand
go
picture, take a
stand
picture,
right
right?
about where you're,
Yes.
and I'll take a picture. I'll take a picture.
Oh my.
Yes.
Yeah, the pictures.
And then when we got home, and
One Lincoln was sitting down and one Lincoln was standing up.
Oh, dear.
So I said he got tired.
so there, I think it was around Park in Chicago.
But it worked.
However,
That's another part of it.
yes.
But my grandpa's sense of humor, it just oozed through everything. The stories, a few that I've heard. Obviously, he was a builder, and so he had a pickup truck. And he got such a kick out of one day, he got a speeding ticket for speeding uphill in Jamestown.
Wow.
And he just, I'm on a truck, did it? Yeah. And he was just, and then in the choir from your dad
Yes.
telling me stories of he'd
Evidently
sing in
there
the
was
choir
a
and
Swedish
crack them up all
song
the time. And
that imitated birds. So in the song, they went tweet, 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 and I guess
There was
you
a
couldn't
Swedish
sing it.
song we used to sing, and then they do the bird singing.
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And he would
You
crack
remember
up.
that,
It was
Cynthia?
Yeah, I
seriously.
do.
Wow.
Wow.
Gosh.
So-
Well, I'm
You
old.
guys are good. I don't remember that at all.
Me neither.
Oh, It was,
Shirley
It
remembers
wasn't-
everything from age 2.
Oh, that's
they
funny,
used to
bird
sing.
singing.
They'd sing it in Swedish, and then all of a sudden, it'd all make bird sounds. It was really a cute song.
But they were cohesive with other Baptist churches, all of the conference. It was important to them.
You know, that character of the conference was something that was really loved by the conference churches up until a certain time. I think it was in the 60s or 70s, when they began to talk about, well, maybe we should have a conference every other year. And then so many churches started to become involved, not just Swedish churches, but from all different ethnic groups. And that cohesiveness, we began to see the transition. I began pastoring in 72, and we began to see a transition where that really sense of community among the Conference Baptist churches we began to lose that. And I don't think that exists anymore.
Well, we haven't been to any more conferences.
How important it is for us to
Because
connect.
they don't have some
And they
conference
began to
churches.
do it on a bicentennial basis and so on.
That wasn't
People
that
just
long
quit
ago.
coming because they'd have it out on the West Coast, they'd have it out on the East Coast.
Okay, we'll move it around.
Well, we haven't gotten away from that, so we haven't been going to any conferences
But
anymore.
now that they don't call it the Baptist General Conference.
I know.
They call it Converge.
Converge.
Call it what? What do they call it?
They call it Converge.
Converge, really?
Converge, yeah,
I
we-
didn't know
And
that.
what does that stand for something, or?
I don't know.
It'll be
Well,
on
they
the.
wanted to take Baptist out of the name.
Oh, okay.
Why?
They viewed it as a negative connotation.
Okay.
Nobody
In our
knows what
culture?
it means anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
Nobody
I
knows
can
what
agree with
conversion-
that.
They thought it would
Yeah.
open up to all the other things, I guess, somehow.
Yes, I had a friend that said Converge. It sounds like a cult.
That's what we said.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
that's
it
what we
does
said.
sound like a cult.
When I was pastoring in Michigan, one of the executives came to visit our church. We had just finished a building program, so he says, "You know, we're going to change the name to Converge." We were a Baptist church, Cornerstone Baptist Church, and we were the largest church in town. In fact, we were the flagship church for the whole Michigan Baptist Conference. And I said, you know, if you've got a good church, it's not going to make a dime's worth of difference when
Yeah,
you
what
call
you
it
call it.
Cornerstone Church or Cornerstone Baptist Church. And it did in our community because it kind of defines, in a sense, what we believe. And this whole concept of Baptist, you know, if somebody says, well, I don't understand that, explain it to them. You know, because it's baptism, identifying with the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's what we do. That set Baptists apart in Sweden from the Lutherans.
To the point where they had to leave everything they knew
Right.
to come to another country because they wanted to follow in that.
Exactly.
Those
The
footsteps.
Anabaptists,
And it was
they
a
were
very-
persecuted because they,
The relationship,
that.
personal relationship with Jesus Christ was very important, even as it was in the book of Acts. And they said, no, we're going to follow what the Bible says in the book of Acts. That's why they called it Anabaptist. They said, you know, you're rebaptizing people all over again. That's what Anna means. And they said, yeah, we're Anabaptists. And this was a defining issue, and it has not been that way since then. Or since the time when, and so there are many, and I don't want to make a bold statement here, but a blanket statement, but there are some of these churches now that are saying, well, you know, if you just confess your faith in Jesus Christ, baptism is not that important. And I really took issue with that with this executive. I said, you know, this is an important definition for our group. You know, and you want to, you know, I know we want to reach the world for Christ, but let's make sure we maintain that biblical heritage that has been so important for from our heritage.
Yes,
By the way,
yes.
this is the book I wrote about my grandmother on my mother's side.
God bless.
And I remember, what happened to my glasses? I remember you were talking about what they had to go through in Sweden to leave, and I wrote this: one final and essential detail had to be addressed with the local parish pastor before she could leave. Her name was Edith. Precise family records were maintained by law in the Swedish Lutheran Church, and Edla could not move away from Kimbo until until she received a Flittenbesg. This exit permit not only recorded her departure from the church in Sweden, but commended her to a synod in Norra America, where she could continue in the Lutheran faith. So they had to get that exit permit from the Lutheran church, and then they had to commit to joining a Lutheran church when they got there.
Wow,
And of
interesting.
course, well, she did not, but that's what it was all about.
Yeah, Dad showed me through their papers of their exit, but I don't remember ever hearing about them having to join the Lutheran church. They just had their exit papers so they could leave.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about, obviously, we're talking about the Jamestown Swedish Baptist Church. And were they defined as being different? Was there any degree of persecution? That's a strong word. But just kind of being here and starting out in kind of almost in secret society type of thing, as opposed to that? Or because they come from an area where they were not the state religion, they were leaving from one area to come to another. I'm just curious whether Jamestown accepted all of that because they had their own defined religious institutions. Any sense of that at all?
I think Jamestown was very welcoming to them, and they felt freedom here because they spoke Swedish.
Yeah.
And the fact that the First Baptist Church here, that was of the American Baptist Church,
That's
Right.
actually helped them to establish
Assimilate.
their building.
My mother was American Baptist before she got married.
I was too.
Yep. And that's where your family went. I also think at the time there was so much immigration, and so there was the Italian groups and the Swedish groups. So I think they all accepted it. This was the Swedes here and the Italians were here. I don't think there was any pull against one or the other. I just think it was just that time where they all
They spoke Swedish.
helped each other. They had the common
Right.
language
Yeah.
and,
right. And
They
so
all
that-
spoke Swedish for,
Right.
when did they stop doing Swedish service?
Yeah.
1940.
1940.
Ours was a
What?
Swedish Baptist before, and
Fact.
they spoke Swedish.
Yeah.
And the
That's what you
Swedes-
did, yeah.
Well, as a child, I know we always had one song in Swedish when they started the service when I
I
was
feel like
young.
I remember that.
Yeah. And the Swedes all spoke Swedish amongst themselves, the older ones,
Yeah.
So you'd hear these sayings and you knew what they were saying. Well, I can't remember if I couldn't say them.
Yeah. You know what was most difficult is the pastors who went to the Swedish seminary, and they learned how to preach in Swedish. And they
Yes.
were just, they could preach up a storm in Swedish, and then all of a sudden, everybody's changing to English, and it took quite a transition to
Oh,
do
yeah.
that. Sometimes it was over a period of years where they'd have one service and then another service
Yeah.
in English.
We did do that.
But the pastors had the most difficult time, because if they were not fluent in English like they were in Swedish, they just could not continue to be the same kind of pastor as they were before. It was a very difficult time.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
And our first one was a circuit rider, so he went between churches. He
My
taught
husband
by
had an
horseback.
uncle that was a circuit preacher. His
And where
oldest
was that?
uncle.
In Ludington,
Ludington, yeah.
that was
Mass?
in Ludington,
Michigan.
Michigan, yeah.
Okay.
Peter Gentoff was he came from Sweden in the 1800s, and he would ride a horse to several towns in our area, and he would hold services in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. And Danish was close enough to understand Swedish. I don't know Danish at all, and I know very little Swedish.
But the Danes and the Swedes
The
did not
Danes-
get along.
Not get along, yeah.
This is what
We
happened.
wouldn't have listened.
church, they, there was just enough Swedes and enough Danes to form a church. And they said, okay, let's see if we can do that. That lasted for about 3 years. And then they said, we can't do this anymore. So the Danes formed their own Danish Baptist church, and we had a Swedish Baptist church. And anyway, that's what happened.
Yeah. So
That's
another.
an aside, when, in my mother's mountain of information, there is conversation with, and bulletins about, half in Swedish, half in English. And so there's this whole transition, and when you talk about, ministers having a hard time, it's as if it's like some of the silent movie stars having terrible times going
Getting to
into the sound.
talkies, yeah.
It's the same.
Let me tell you what else happened. This has to do with my father, because he grew up speaking both Swedish and English. And, when somebody grows up in a bilingual family, you don't know when you're speaking English and when you're speaking Swedish.
That was my grandpa.
That type of thing. So he'd go to school and they'd say, what'd you have for breakfast? And he'd tell them all the Swedish names for the cereals and everything else he had for breakfast, and everybody'd laugh at him, okay? And so he was made fun of until he finally figured out, okay, which language is which, and when do I speak English, when do I speak Swedish? And when he, later on in life, when he felt called to the ministry, he had a stuttering problem because of this. And I remember even as a boy, he would stand in front of a mirror and practice saying words because he would stutter, and it was, and especially when he got tired, it was very difficult for him. So this transition was not an easy thing, and I'm sure other, bilingual homes, kids have experienced the same problem.
I wish we'd have been bilingual, but my dad married an Englishman, so that took care of that. But,
Well, that's the other thing too, though. When our parents were growing up, they wanted to speak English,
right.
and their parents wanted them to speak English. They wanted to be part of the United
yeah,
States.
Dad had to go to school for a year to learn to speak English before he could go to public school.
My father too.
Yeah, they went to the church is what they had to school. Yeah.
But when they wanted to say, I think this happened with Edith and Carl too, when they wanted to communicate so the kids couldn't understand.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, that happened in my house with my dad and mom.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
they started speaking in
Especially at Christmas time. The Swede would come out like crazy. Yeah. So we wouldn't know what they were talking about. Yeah.
I also miss that I grew up with grandparents speaking with both their Swedish, but even their English was Swedish.
Yes,
And that
it was.
little lilt to the way they talked.
Yes.
And the accents they was, yeah, that's the way it goes.
That's right.
What we got
That's
to do,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, we're having chicken. We're having chicken for dinner.
Super.
Yes. So, it's we need to keep passing on our heritage, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
So talk about the book here for what you got, Shirley. The books you have, and because I think folks would like, what do you have so that people know not only the books that you got and you're preserving, which is kind of cool. You're the historian.
Okay. So I have the records from both Swedish Baptist Church and also Chandler Street Baptist Church.
Wow.
The oldest begins in 1917.
Can you pass that around, Shirley? Are we allowed to?
Sure.
Should have gloves on.
Yeah.
Well, I know, and then here I have these sticky notes too, and I'm thinking, what am I doing to the paper? But most of it is in Swedish up until 1940s. But one thing I did find, there are many things I found that I want to show. But this is, we were talking about Esther, little Esther.
Yeah.
And I did find also last night, a card of thanks was read by somebody. This was from Sarah Erickson, thanking the church for flowers and for Esther's funeral. The pastor reported the death of a member, Esther Erickson. A message of condolences was sent to her mother, sisters, and brothers. And then this is actually typed. Called home. Esther Linnea Erickson was called home last Sunday night at 10:31 p.m. from a year's illness. She was born in Dalarna, Sweden, June 12, 1896. She was converted in early life and joined the Baptist Church in Västerås. She came to Jamestown from Sweden and resided here since that time. Shortly after her arrival, she joined our church, of which she was a beloved and faithful member. She is survived and mourned by her mother, Mrs. Sarah Erickson, 3 sisters, Mrs. C.S. Carlson and Mrs. Eric Erickson of Jamestown, and Mrs. Ruth Larson of Sweden. 3 brothers, Stein Erickson of Jamestown, Joseph Erickson of Newport, Rhode Island, and Carl Erickson of Sweden. Other relatives and a host of friends that also mourn her. The funeral took place from Youngsburg Funeral Home Wednesday, November 10th. The pastor officiated was assisted by Reverend Arvid Edstrom. Mrs. Chingren, Ella, remember Ella Chingren,
Oh my gosh.
sang, and also Mrs. Judith Lynn sang.
What year was that?
This was 1943. 1940, the records were in English.
Okay.
And Anna Johnson
Yeah.
had great handwriting. So this was from the funeral of Reverend Arvid Edstrom. The pastor's death was reported, the pastor reported the death of the member of Reverend Arvid Edstrom. Former pastor of this church died at the General Hospital Tuesday, 5:15 p.m., having suffered a stroke at his home last Sunday. He is survived and mourned by his wife, Mrs. Irene Edstrom, 3 daughters, Mrs. Edward Marker, Mrs. J. Henry Carlson, and Mrs. Walter M. Carlson. Okay. Of this city, a brother, A. Arthur Edstrom of Bridgeport, Connecticut, 2 brothers in Sweden, and 6 grandchildren. Reverend Mr. Edstrom was born in Örebro, Norrka, Sweden, April 2nd, 1872. He graduated from Bethel Seminary in Stockholm in 1899. He came to this country in 1902 as a representative of the Swedish Baptists in Finland. Wow. They have a different language too. So he knew Finnish? He knew the Finnish language as well?
A little bit, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. My grandmother, it was all the records for Irene say, the early ones say Finnish and the later say Swedish. Very interesting.
Okay.
But it turns out it was an island that was owned by Sweden at one point and then not. And so, yeah.
So he came to attend the 50th anniversary jubilee of the Swedish Baptist General Conference, which I think this book is from. I think.
Ooh, neat.
Soon after, he received a call to the Swedish Baptist Church of Duluth, Minnesota, and has served our churches in Worthington, Minnesota, Kansas City, Missouri, Central Church of St. Paul, and our church. He was a good preacher and pastor. He held many responsible positions in our denomination and served well. We express our sincere sympathy with the bereaved family and other relatives. Last Sunday afternoon, the funeral service for Reverend Edstrom was held in our church, which was filled to capacity.
I can imagine.
The pastor officiated, assisted by Reverend R.O. Hudson, Reverend Martin Hamlin, and Major Johansson. A quartet composed of Mrs. Chingren, Mrs. Judith Lynn, Corden Marker, and S.A. Stroth, Sam Stroth? Okay. Sang 2 very appropriate songs in English, and Mrs. Maritz Swanson sung one in Swedish. Miss Ruth Munson was at the organ.
Oh, how about that?
I took piano lessons from Ruth.
Oh,
did
yeah. Yep.
Yep,
And
so
again,
did
can I
Shirley.
get a copy of that, Shirley?
Yes,
Thank
this
you.
one has this kind of paper in it.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So, there's just so much that's in here,
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, of our family.
Yeah.
Our family, they came, they worked, the church was established before they came, but
They were huge pieces of it.
Yes, they were pillars. They were
But don't you
pillars.
think that was their life?
Oh,
It was their
It was
life.
everything. It was their social life, religious, spiritual, family. This was
Everything.
Church Sunday morning, Sunday night,
Wednesday,
Wednesday,
yeah.
meetings in between.
That's right, that's
And
right.
then the weekends, you usually had
It
something.
was. It
Went to the
was.
Ponderosa,
Yeah.
we went someplace.
Yeah.
Warren, Pennsylvania. There was a relationship with the Warren Baptist Church and their
Right.
young youth anyways. I think
Yes.
they're forward back.
Yes, yes.
Well, and CS was superintendent of Sunday school for years and years and years. And he had that big car when cars came out, and he would leave early and drive all over the city to pick up other kids and take them to church, and then come home and get his kids and leave grandma home because he would always invite somebody else
Yeah, exactly.
to dinner. And grandma always just put more potatoes in the pot.
Right.
Yep.
Well, one of my girlfriends from infancy actually became a member of our church. They went to the Lutheran church. Her father had a heart attack when we were in 3rd grade. This is Mom Howard. And my dad told Pastor Hales at the time that he was in the hospital. And he was the only pastor that went to visit him at the hospital. And they changed from Lutheran to Baptist from that. And Pat's still very active in
You
our
said
church.
Pastor Hales, is that Pastor Bob Hales?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
He was when he
was an
retired,
associate.
I asked him to become an assistant in Ludington where I was pastor.
Really?
Yeah, and he passed away there, and I had his funeral. But the interesting thing is, he was the best man at when my dad was married to my mother, and they were very good friends.
And then Ruth is his wife.
Yeah, and she's passed away too. But he passed away, and my father passed away 4 days later.
Oh, really?
No, I'd like to go.
They
And he was-
they stood up for each other.
They stood
Your
up
dad
for each
stood
other,
his
yeah.
way too, yeah.
But he was a good pastor.
17, number 17.
Hi, so welcome.
I just, your father's name came out here.
But it was because of that mission work that your
Harold
dad
Carlson
did.
spoke of the evangelistic meetings that were being planned and suggested that intensive advertising be carried out and that we have special music. He was asked to contact the song leader. He suggested a piper and Sam Stroth, and Pastor were elected to handle the advertising. It was voted that Harold be given a wedding gift of $15. And then Mr. Berquist voiced the appreciation of the church to Gladys Carlson for her fine work and presented her with a gift present. Gladys responded.
I love it.
Wow,
I
isn't that
just love
something?
it.
Yeah, $15.
Yeah. What was the date there?
This is from, about, what, 1945? August
It would
27,
have been 40, probably 45.
45.
Yeah.
Yeah. It talked about a touring supper that was done August 27th of 45, and that comes after that. What month were they married?
That's a good question. I think they were married in June of 45, I think.
Okay, yeah, 1945.
A Turin supper, how unusual. Yeah, Swedish church.
Oh, and they were fabulous cooks.
Oh, yeah.
Fabulous.
No question.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I have some of the china, as do some of you. And if you would like a plate from the Swedish Baptist Church, I'll bring one tomorrow.
I would like one.
Okay.
I never got one, so yes.
Sure.
I would love that.
Okay.
I remember when they were passing them out. I mean, remember when there was a time when they had
You
boxes
wouldn't have
of
to
that
pass
stuff, you
around.
know?
Well, what happened was they cleaned out Hillcrest's kitchen, and they had all of these dishes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we were away or something, And I came back and I found out that they had been donated to Community Helping Hands. So I sent Dan down there and I said, buy them all.
You are incredible.
So
That's
he went
wonderful.
down and explained the situation, and they said, oh, well, I don't think they were supposed to be donated. So I have them. I have what's left. And what,
I have the size plate.
So he was.
Ah.
I have the plant because it just shows the name.
yes, yes.
But that's one thing that, one of my memories that I really enjoyed was the dinners at church. But all the rattling of the cups and saucers, even when you went to the cake shop, you'd hear that. You'd go down to the coffee steward and the cups would rattle. Well, now we have all this.
Yeah.
And there's none of that. But the chatter and that is just, and you smell of coffee is just
well, and also, when you think, they would make cold dormer dinners. Can you imagine wrapping all that cabbage?
Yes, for a dinner. I love it.
And then, when they would do all the dishes, they did them by hand.
That's
And they
right.
would put them in boiling water, so some of them are cracked, but the others are in really good shape. So,
Well, that's when life started changing, my mother said. Was when we got dishwashers, when we had to have to do dishes. The women would be in the kitchen cleaning up from supper and talking, and share everything that happened in the day. The guys would go in the living room and they'd share everything that happened in their day. And we've lost a lot of that family time like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Enter television.
Okay, Greg, do you want to share? This is something unique, I think, in Jamestown.
Well, what it is, it's a core burger, which was instituted by a guy named Norm Owen. Norm Owen, who was Swedish, and he thought he was a meat guy, and he decided that he would just simply convert it into something which is bite sized.
Summer thing is what-
Summer thing, and they started doing this at the Scandinavian Heritage core burger. I mean, it was like, wow,
first time I
core
ever
burger.
had
And you
one,
couldn't
yeah.
even get close because everybody lined up for it. He's since passed away, but now places like Wegmans and other places have core burgers. This comes from Eckloff's.
Eckloff.
These are Eckloff.
Perfect, that's better.
And so what you, exactly, so what you have, just so you know, Nils, maybe you ought to focus on this. Here, we'll take a look.
It looks like meatloaf almost.
Yeah, it's a meatloaf, and with that comes, you get some lignin, berry, and most important for the Eckloffs, which is very much Swedish, you get a
Big striped cookie.
pink striped cookie, which is well.
Oh, yes.
And a pickle, and that is your meal.
Love it.
My father worked for Pearson's Market for years, but he learned the market business he worked down at the city market too. But we all shared the family recipes, so all of the corn made at Pearson's was our family recipe. The prasiltas were our family recipe. All of those meat dishes were from our family at Pearson's.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Interesting.
And naturally, it was that, your
Yeah.
brothers.
do we know Yisanum?
Yes, I was just
Oh,
gonna say,
yes.
can we do that?
Absolutely, great idea, Shirley.
I love it.
Well, remember, yeah, we'll do this, but we're gonna focus in on Shirley, who's got the voice. As opposed to the rest of it.
Yisanum.
Yeah.
A Yisanum till boors we go, thou sine Gud de mat we får. Yisanum, amen.
Thank you. Amen. Nice job.
Even my kids know that
Now
one.
we need to turn that away. I don't
Even-
want
You don't want everybody watching you?
Back
Yeah,
of it,
this
and then
is
I
an
took
important call.
pictures. I got about 60 pictures of each family on here.
How many of
About 60 of each
Wow.
one of them. And copied them off. I didn't do a great job. This is mom and dad dating. And this is my grandparents, mom and dad, and then us kids, and then the pictures. But that was back in the year 2000, I think. Does it say 2000?
It's an amazing piece of art.
Did you start something?
Yes.
And,
Do it again.
and this is our genealogy up to that on our
Here, let me
family.
hold it and then you explain.
Wow.
That's just incredible.
This is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Okay, what do you have here?
They liked it at the funeral home when I brought it in.
Of course.
This is mom and dad here.
Shirley, would you mind getting that
David,
back?
Shirley, and mine, Randy, and my sister, and then, but you know, we'd add it on now, so.
Right.
I have,
Wait, what was this all about that I missed?
That's pictures of the family, 60 of them.
That's yours.
Mom and Dad, when they were dating.
Aw.
This is grandparents here, and then that's kids. And I did about 60 pictures of each of us, I think. Shared each one's gladness as well as the tears.
Yeah, we're fine.
Lasting
That's
memories
fine.
throughout the years.
I just
Cherish
noticed
each member remain heart to heart.
About the
family
car.
is forever. So it's a little
That is
camera.
lovely. Oh my goodness, what a cherished treasure. Wow.
Isn't it?
I wish I could mom has that picture.
Probably. So anyways,
Very nice.
I'd bring that in. So you
Yeah.
can see.
That is a remarkable
Yeah.
family tree.
How did you get those pictures on material to be able to sew them
So-
in? Huh?
No, you copy the pictures on,
Yes.
onto,
And I should have taken it to a copy shop. I did it at home and
I'll help you guys
you don't know how hot to get the iron, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of them didn't turn out that great, but the thought was good.
Wow, it's unbelievable.
it's,
You want me to read this?
Yeah, let me make a good copy of that and we'll catch up.
Want me to
That's
take
an
your copy?
updated.
You guys done?
From this
Let me do that,
genealogy.
let me do that.
So, that genealogy is not on there?
Well, it is, but
It is,
he's-
okay.
she's, ex-
But you've got the
she's
grand.
extended it, she's
Yeah,
extended it.
yeah, so everybody's on there, that's all I want to know.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
about
thank you.
23 more years of this.
Yeah, I want it.